right, for those of you who don't know, I'm Jake, and this is my sister Gabby, and for some reason we test ourselves with finding the bestest Disney movie ever. You may be asking yourself, why is that? You should explain that.
So we were recently in Walt Disney World, and you know, as trips come to an end, you usually don't want them to come to an end.
Unless they really suck.
Which ours didn't. So Jake came up with this magical idea to keep the magic alive, and that was to find out what the bestest Disney movie ever is. And, well, how are we going to do that?
Well, we split... Okay, well, let me start over. We looked at a list of Disney movies, and there were 700-something of just Disney-owned and original properties. So we boiled that down to 10 separate brackets, of which there are only, for the most part, unless there's special rules, which we'll get to, original Disney content or content that is important to Walt Disney World and corresponding parks.
Correct. So the first thing we're going to do is explain to you what each of those 10 brackets is. Mm-hmm. So the first bracket is animated with an animal protagonist.
Yes.
So that means that the protagonist of the movie is an animal, or if they spend time in the movie both as an animal or as a human, that their primary form is, or like their original form is in an animal. And so the reason this is important is because the other related category is animated human protagonist, which, as you can guess, is basically the opposite. The protagonist is a human, or they spend, like, their original form is as a human if they spend time as a human and an animal. And you're probably asking yourselves, why would you have this really specific distinction about if they're both human and an animal? Well, I'm glad you asked, because there are movies such as The Emperor's New Groove, in which, if you've seen it, you know that Kuzco, the main character, his original form is human. He spends the majority of the movie in animal form as a llama, and then returns to his human form at the end of the movie. So, because of movies such as that, Emperor's New Groove fits in the human protagonist category because Kuzco's original form is a human.
And there's one other movie that really is something we got to talk about with these two, and that's Ichabod and Mr. Toad.
Yeah.
Ichabod and Mr. Toad are both equally the protagonists of their corresponding movies, so we actually split The Adventures of Ichabod and Mr. Toad into Ichabod and Mr. Toad. Ichabod fits in the human protagonist, Mr. Toad fits in the animal protagonist. But other than that, they pretty much apply.
Yeah, pretty
evenly.
Yeah.
Easily.
So the next category is our biggest category, and that's the live action originals category.
Want me to explain that? Okay, so any movie that is live action and was made by Disney, if it is the kind of circumstance such as 101 Dalmatians, where it starts animated and then it's live action, that doesn't count. The original form of the movie must be live action, and it must be a movie that was made by Disney. If we went on all of the live action movies that Disney owns, we'd be here forever. So we cut out all the ones where, sure, they were originally live action, but they weren't owned by Disney originally. So any movie that's owned by Disney and its main primary form and original form is live action.
Yeah, and so the reason we talk about like primary and original form is, so you have movies like Enchanted, the movie with Amy Adams as Giselle the princess. So like Giselle isn't, kind of like Mia Thermopolis in The Princess Diaries, isn't like a Disney princess. That'll be relevant in a little while. But especially in the case of Enchanted, like, there are animated bits to the movie.
Yeah.
And in this case, like, Giselle does start as an animated character, but she spends, like, 95 to 98% of the movie as a live-action movie. And so for that reason, movies like Enchanted, for example, still fall into the live-action category, even though there's a little bit of animation involved.
And we didn't sit there with a stopwatch and find exactly what percentage is animated and live action. We just picked which we thought was the most in cases where it applied.
So next is live action reboots, which are live action movies that are remakes of original animated movies, which is becoming particularly relevant in the recent years as we're seeing a surge of a ton of live action remakes of like 90s classics. Mm-hmm. So that's things like, if you recently saw the new Aladdin with Will Smith as the genie, that would fall in this category because the original Aladdin is animated and the new movie, the remake, is live action.
And then we also have some older classics in there because it technically was a recent thing where they started rebooting things live action. So we go back all the way to all the ones we could find.
Yeah. Next is the sequels category.
Sequels is pretty basic. We had too many movies in certain categories. So instead of just making one large bracket, we made a 10th bracket for sequels. That's most of the Pirates of the Caribbean movies. We've got like Santa Claus 2 and Santa Claus 3 in there. There's other movies in there, but it's a sequel. Anything that's a sequel goes in the sequels bracket.
The next bracket is the Pixar bracket, which is pretty self-explanatory. It is all Pixar canon movies except for Brave. And the reason Brave is not in it is because it's in the next category, which is princesses. And the reason we made that choice is partially because we wanted to keep the brackets even numbered to begin with as much as possible, but it's more prestigious to be a Disney princess. We follow Disney's rules. So anybody who is a Disney princess by Disney standards is included automatically in the princess bracket. So Brave got put in that category. And then the only movie we added to the princess bracket was Frozen. Yeah, we know all the ins and outs about the rules and why Elsa and Anna are not considered official Disney princesses, but for the sake of this bracket, Frozen is considered a princess movie. Which brings us to Disney Channel original movies, or DCOMs.
DCOMs. We will be referring them to as DCOMs because saying Disney Channel original movies is a pain. So Disney Channel original movies are, we went through the list of Disney Channel original movies, aka DCOMs, and we found all the ones that we recognized because there are 1,000,005. Yeah. So we have,
and it's still, I think, the second largest bracket, even after that.
Even after that. So, sure, do we not have all of it? Is it not scientifically accurate? Technically. But we've got the classics, and we added High School Musicals 1 and 2. Technically, they did not air on the Disney Channel.
High School Musical 1 and 2 did air on Disney Channel.
But number 3, I'm sorry.
It's okay. But basically, Jake's point is there are a couple movies that, like, technically did not air on Disney Channel, specifically High School Musical 3, the Hannah Montana movie, and I think the Lizzie McGuire movie fits.
Sky High as well, I believe.
Perhaps, yeah. So those types of movies that like are strongly associated with Disney Channel and Disney Channel programs, even if they didn't air on Disney Channel, got included in this.
But bracket. it's the classics. It's Camp Rock. It's Lemonade Mouth. Most of them are recognizable.
Yeah. The 9th one, I'll let you explain the Marvel bracket.
It's anything in the MCU. So sorry, all 5 of you X-Men fans. It's not X-Men. It is anything in the MCU all the way up to Spider-Man Far From Home. Technically, we might be doing this long enough that we could go into the 2020 movies, but no, we ended it at Far From Home, starting with the original Iron Man. And the reason we picked the movies even before they were acquired by Disney or they were Disney properties is because watching them in order in a lot of cases is just so important. So because it makes so much money for Disney, we incorporated all the movies, not just the ones that are true Disney.
Yeah, so something I want to chime in real quick, which is related to what you just said about like the timing of when we're starting this bracket. It's not going to make sense for us to like go back and redo the bracket to add movies. And so we started with Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, which is the first, feature-length animated film. And we're going up to, I think the most recent film that has been included is the release of Aladdin.
Yeah.
Not The Lion King did not make it into the bracket because it literally just came out 2 seconds ago.
a hot second
ago. So just to like bear that in mind, we realize that like this is gonna take us a while and like more Disney movies are gonna keep coming out, but like we can't just keep adding stuff or we'll never get an answer for you on what's the bestest Disney movie ever.
That's a thing now. Bestest Disney movie ever.
So, and that like is a good segue into the last category, what you were saying about how Marvel's a super important acquisition for Disney. The last category is what we call the IAE category, or Important Acquired Entities, and it's 3 things specifically. Avatar, Star Wars movies, and Indiana Jones movies. Why are these included and like not all the other things that Disney has acquired? Well, because in general, the way we decided what got included, just period, regardless of bracket, was like, how important is this thing to Disney? How did we determine how important it is to Disney? Does it have representation in the Disney parks? We're just in Walt Disney World, so we have a really good idea of what's getting represented there. And what do you see in merchandising? Also got a really good idea of that from just having been in Disney World. So Avatar, Pandora World is like a huge thing happening in Animal Kingdom right now. There's a ton of Star Wars stuff running around Disney World, Disney wherever, merchandising. And Indiana Jones, not as much as the other 2, but they still have that Stunt Spectacular show in Hollywood Studios at Disney World, so it's like important enough for it to have its thing.
It's also important to me.
Yes. So anyway, that's why bracket 10 is the IAE category. So
important anteaters.
Now I think we can talk about we gave a pretty good idea of what got included and what didn't and why, so now we can tell you how the bracket works.
Want me to go ahead and do that?
Go for it.
Just jump in if I miss anything, because I'm bound to. So, the bracket works in the case that we randomized every movie in its original bracket, and we got it to be at least as close to one-on-one as possible. If there was a straggler, that got the last one got a bye, and we just incorporated to have as equal as duels as we could.
Yeah.
But each movie, we will watch it and its counterpart as close to each other as possible.
Preferably without any
yes.
Disney movies in between.
Yes. You are allowed to whet your appetite with other movies if you really need
or
to.
TV shows
or
or whatever
TV shows,
it is that you're watching. But
try not to watch Disney movies in between the two that are dueling. But you watch the one that's dueling and you rank it on the scale. We'll talk about the scale in a second once I finish the bracket. And then you watch the other, rank it on the scale. Whichever has the highest average points will move on to the next round. After you get done with the prelims, you do not have to rewatch every single Disney movie.
Again, or we'd never get through
Or we'd never get through this. But you look at the brackets, the two that are fighting, you're going to think about it, you're going to talk to who you're doing this with, and you're going to move the one on that you think is the best, unless the points are so drastically different that you can just push one along.
Yeah, we decided that after that first round in the preliminary bracket, if in the next duel one of the movies has 7 or more points of a lead on its opponent, it automatically gets to advance. But this only works up until we arrive at the final round of that preliminary bracket. So when there's 2 left standing, you don't get to push somebody automatically into the final bracket. You have to once again talk it out with whoever you're playing with to either unanimously agree. So if it's just Jake and I playing, we have to unanimously agree on who's moving on. If we have more than 2 players, it's by majority.
Yep. So 7 points is a touchdown, so we decided that seemed adequate.
Yeah.
But then, once you crown a winner of all 10 of the brackets, all 10 of those go back into a winner's bracket, and you rewatch the winner's bracket movies to then decide what is the bestest Disney movie ever. That's up to down, not down to up.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's the brackets. There's a lot of them, but the points, is that what you're doing next?
Yeah, so we should talk about, how do you determine the points? Okay, so we made a scorecard. A perfect score on our scorecard is 60 points. So I'm going to do overall enjoyment last because that's what we usually talk about last. So 10 of those points come from what we call the message category, which is is there a message to the movie? Do you like the message? How well do you think the message of the movie got across? That's 10 points. The next 10 points is what we call audience width, which is do you think this movie appeals to a wide range of people? And that's in terms of age and interests and lots of different demographics. Because some movies are going to be really geared toward a small group of people, and other ones are going to have a wider audience. Yeah. Do you want to talk about music?
Sure. Music is the music. Basically, we decided that this is open to interpretation because, as many people know, Disney movies oftentimes have their own original score. And that way, the characters sing, the characters dance. But also there are some movies that are what we call jukebox titles. And they, put together a bunch of songs that fit the theme. And it's open to interpretation whether or not you like one of those better than the other, and you can rank that accordingly, because you might have a lot of music that's written for the movie, but it might not be good, or you might have a lot of music that's tried to be put into the movie, but it's also not good. So it just it depends on interpretation. But overall, it's how did you feel the music helped to move the film along.
Yeah. So that's 10 more points, and then we have 20 points total going to 3 different categories that represent characters. So 10 points are going to what we call the protagonist category, which is basically how much did you like the protagonist or protagonists, and did you think they achieved their goal efficiently?
Yep.
5 points to the antagonist category, which is more or less the same thing for the antagonist, although we talked about the idea of we all know the villain or the antagonist is gonna fail. But how interesting and relevant and creative was their motivation and their pursuit of their goal. And then, you want to talk about sidekicks?
Sure. Sidekicks are not necessarily the literal sidekicks. Yes, everyone knows that Robin is Batman's sidekick, but that's not what we're talking about here. We're talking about all side characters in general. So, it's all of the protagonists friends and allies that are not, the main character, and it's all of the antagonists, lackeys, and the people that they, work with. So for Lion King, for example, it's, you've got Banzai Shenzi and Ed, but you've also got Timon and Pumbaa. They're all sidekicks in a way. And that's 5 points.
Yeah, and that's like, do they help further the goals of the protagonist and antagonist in an interesting and relevant way? And I just want to, like, point out here that in terms of, like, you might be saying, like, what if I think the protagonist in Toy Story is just Woody, but my friend thinks it's Woody and Buzz? We decided it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
You don't even have to discuss these things. Like, you rank it based on who you have in mind. In fact, like, don't talk about it until after you rank, because the point is you average the scores, and that's how you get the score. And so if we wanted you to, like, talk about it and agree on a score, we wouldn't bother with doing the averages. So in this case, it doesn't matter. Like, go with what's on your mind, what you're feeling about the movie, and all will be well. And then the last 10 points to make up the total of 60 is what we call the overall enjoyment category.
It's, how did you like the movie? Boiling it down to, this is something that people are meant to enjoy. Did you enjoy the film? And sure, will this be a little bit based on your interests and your tastes? Yeah, but it's important to, did you enjoy the film?
Right.
And so it's just a basic category in that way.
Right. So based off that, you're going to get your initial score of somewhere between 0 and 60. And then we have what we call 3 bonus points, which can help you top up on certain movies to potentially help them move along. So the 3 bonus points are, first, what we call nostalgia, which is like, does your past enjoyment of this movie influence your current enjoyment of it? So that would be like a movie that you really, really, really loved as a child, and maybe now as an adult you're like, yeah, maybe it's not the best movie, but I still have a super special place in my heart for it because I loved it as a kid. Hidden gem. Hidden gem is that movie that people are like, man, is that really good? And you're like, yes, it is. You just need to watch it. So I don't have a Disney movie example yet because we haven't watched them all, but that's like the Scooby-Doo 2 movie, man. Everyone's like, that movie sucks. No, it doesn't. It's great. It's a hidden gem. That's the hidden gem. Yeah. And then the last one is kind of my favorite just because I think I like the name we gave it.
It's a pretty great name.
Is the why? Because we
like you.
And that's basically like, you just really like this movie and you want to give it a little extra love. And so the way these bonus points work are, so first, you finish watching your movie, you silently do your scoring without talking to whoever you're playing with. And then the way Jake and I like to do it is we talk about it after then. We count, we'll be like 3, 2, 1. And like show a number for whatever category we're talking about, and then we talk about it.
We talk about it, yeah. And
then we reveal what our total score is, and we average them together to find what I've been referring to as the net value of
how much they're worth to us
of whatever the movie is. The cool thing about bonus points is those bonus points go on top of that average score. So like, if I were watching Scooby-Doo 2 and the net score was like 42 and I wanted to give it the why because we like you point, it's now a 43, which doesn't sound like a lot, but
it can push it over.
Right, especially in the case of when you get into further into the bracket where you have automatic advance. That could be the difference between getting or not getting your automatic advance and potentially getting a shot to move on if you previously like wouldn't have had enough points, you know what I mean? So
disclaimer, Scooby-Doo 2 will not be in the bracket. It is not a Disney movie.
It's not.
Do you want me to explain how the points work when you're, how far you can go with the points? Because, like, you can put them on, but when can you put them on? You want me to talk about that? So, when it comes to putting on the points, you can put them on whenever except for, I think we agreed on the final round and the winner's bracket. Winner's bracket, all bonus points are out. And once you get to that final duel between 2 movies for the title of the best movie in the bracket, you can no longer add bonus points because then you could just stack 3 on 1 and it would just get unfair. So
and the other thing I just want to add about the bonus points is you don't have to add it immediately after watching the movie. So let's say you're thinking you want to put it on the movie that you watched first in a particular duel. You don't have to put that point on until the duel is over and you're deciding who's going to advance. Just as far as timing goes. And then the only other thing is you can only use one of each of those 3 bonus points once per bracket. So in each bracket you get one of each of the 3 of those. And so it's definitely a good thing to like look at the bracket ahead of time and know more or less what movies are in it, so that you can reserve those bonus points for the movies you really want to use.
And you can put 3 on 1. You can put 1 on 3. You can put 2 on 1, 1 on another. It's however you want. Preferably you don't just go, well, I think it's a hidden gem and it's all the other 2, and then just shove them on. Actually think about what is your preferences for these movies.
Totally. So with that in mind, we're gonna wrap up here just by talking about, we've already done one duel, and so we're just gonna like walk you through what that looked like. Also, if you saw our post the other day, you know that our first duel was Cars and Toy Story 2, and a lot of people weighed in, and that makes us super happy. That's super fun. So keep doing that as we go through this. But basically, we went through the process like we were saying before with the scorecard. Neither of us used any bonus points.
Nope.
And they came out pretty evenly. Like, we were within a couple points of each other.
Yeah.
On both of them. So basically, when all was said and done, I gave Cars a score of 43 out of 60.
And I gave a 40 out of 60, if I remember correctly.
And we had a third friend chiming in on this particular movie, which is, the other thing about the averages is, like, yeah, it's not perfectly scientific if you're not using the same number of people every time. But the thing that's fun about this is, like, if you have friends that want to chime in on certain ones and not others, or, like, that kind of stuff, go for it. So we had another friend who gave Cars a 44 out of 60, and so the average and the final score of Cars was 42.3. And then we watched Toy Story 2 and did the same process of the scorecard. And I gave it a total score of 48, and Jake gave it a total score of...
I think it was like 43 or something. It was higher than my other one, that's all I know.
Okay. So then our average and our final score for that one was 46.5. So in the case of the primary bracket, it's not, like, we don't do the whole difference of 7 and blah, blah, blah. In this case, it's
Toy Story 2
clean.
1.
So Toy Story 2 1. Toy Story 2 is moving up in the bracket.
I have it right here.
And you have it right here. So
it's really hard to see, so I'll get a little closer to the camera. You can see we just drew a little blue line here, and that shows that Toy Story 2 was the one moving on.
Right, so then once we watch Incredibles and Ratatouille and decide who wins in that duel, Toy Story 2 will be facing that winner. And then it just, like, progresses from there in terms of a normal bracket. And like we said, once you get to the finals, you have to rewatch all of them. And yeah, so it's going to take us a while for sure to get through all this.
So we're going to go get to some Disney movies so that we can do this before we turn 60. So thanks for watching. Hope you enjoy, playing along with us. And we're having a great time doing this. So keep chiming in. See you next time.